You're listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, the place to learn about new technology and technological advances before they become mainstream. This podcast is sponsored by Ingram Micro's Imagine Next. It's not about the destination. It's about going someplace you never thought possible. Go to imaginenext.ingrammicro.com to find out more. Let's get into it.
Welcome to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and my guest today is Michael Haag. He's the Director of Product Marketing at VMware. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Carrie. No problem at all. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to join today.
So back in November of 2019, VMware had an article that they put out, and it stated that according to 451 Research, the vast majority of enterprises are going towards an integrated hybrid IT environment, with 57% of organizations moving toward an integrated on-off-premise hybrid IT environment, and that the IDC research found that about 62% of public cloud IaaS users surveyed used multiple IaaS providers. Do you think now in July 2020, with more people working from home, these numbers and research have changed? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, great question. The world has definitely changed a lot since the end of last year. With the new norms and changes that we've seen over the past 6 months, I definitely see the use and adoption of multi-cloud environments continuing to grow. In my role at VMware, so I focus on helping our VMware cloud providers, our managed service providers, really grow their business. And this is a set of 4,000 plus cloud providers across 120 different countries that are all looking to use VMware products to build clouds, whether it's hosted private cloud, multi-tenant public clouds, and then deliver managed services on top of them. And so setting that as the background of who we talk to, these cloud providers are all out there competing in this space. And in just talking with them over the past few months, I mean, they're seeing tremendous growth. They're seeing a lot of end customers reach out who are realizing that they are faced with new IT challenges that they didn't have before, that they need to address, and need some help in that expertise. And as I think about it, maybe there's two buzzwords, phrases that come to mind, I think encapsulate some of where we spent a lot of time focusing on over the past few months. One is around business continuity. Again, one of these lovely marketing buzzy terms that we like to use, but this idea that, I mean, organizations are really starting to think and scratch their head on how do they face these new business operations and classic and issues, and not just the classic issues of flooding, data center fires, natural disaster types of environments, but now these fundamental events that are changing how across the world we're living, working, traveling differently than we have in the past, and definitely this notion of protecting a business, keeping that business running, is one that's causing on. And I think the remote workforce is one area that really pops up. Just last week, I was talking to the lead, or my sales lead for our end user computing space, and he focuses on our cloud provider segments. And he's usually a pretty laid back person, pretty easygoing, but I could tell he was on edge and feeling the pressure because, as he said, I think they're seeing more requests over the past couple months than they did probably in all of the second half of last year, for people looking for, again, virtual desktop, remote workforce tools, remote access to application tools, and looking at and how providers see this as a huge opportunity. So I think that's definitely driving this idea of this hybrid IT environment. And then the other phrase that keeps coming up is this notion that clouds are the new server. And maybe this is a phrase that dates me, shows my age a little bit, and how long I've been in this space with others. But this notion where 10, 15 years ago, when vSphere was in the early days and really catching off, we talked a lot about how it created this new abstraction layer. It eliminated the need for a lot of people to worry about the underlying hardware, the CPU memory details. Didn't matter to everyone anymore. Still, someone had to care about them, but this abstraction layer made it easier for those people on the application side to simply just get the resources they need. And I think we're seeing that trend show up in cloud as well, where people are now looking at their applications. It's still the heart of what end businesses need. It's all about the applications, and we'll probably talk about that more later today. But this focus on the applications and finding the best cloud endpoint, the best place for that to live, whether it's a public cloud, regional cloud, local cloud, private cloud, a lot of choices, but common there is they're all clouds. It's all this multi-cloud world. So I haven't seen any new numbers yet from the analysts. But I think given the trends we're seeing, given this focus on business continuity and customers needing help from providers, with the folks on applications and people looking at that now, what cloud makes the most sense for where my application to live. I think we'll continue to see this hybrid cloud world grow. Again, most people will be operating in the cloud world. Doesn't mean everything will be in the public cloud, but we'll all be operating like it's a cloud. So we'll have this hybrid environment. And then I do think we'll see more and more vendors choosing different cloud providers to help address different needs across their different applications.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the problems, but it's in a sense a good problem to have, is that cloud providers need to evolve their business as they react to this growth of competition in IaaS. So I'd love for you to kind of chat first about the difference between cloud providers versus the large public cloud leaders. And then maybe tell us, how can cloud providers really differentiate themselves to stay competitive and relevant at this time?
Yeah, this is a question I fundamentally asked myself this question a couple years ago. So I've been at VMware a number of years, spent my first few years on the storage side of things, vSAN, hyperconverged infrastructure. Had the opportunity to move over to our cloud provider team a couple of years ago and fundamentally asked myself this question too. I was like, clearly the big cloud providers, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, are growing strong. And what is that fit of providers? What is their long-term growth prospect? How do they differentiate themselves? And I thought about this and came up with an analogy that I used that I was trying to find how do I mirror what these providers are doing and what's going to play out. And I saw a lot of similarities to our financial industry, and specifically the banking world. And it gave me some insights into how I think this space may evolve and the role that these two types of cloud providers will have. And I've used this analogy a few times, and I always like to do it in a live audience because I start with a poll question, and I'll ask those listeners. So for those people listening, you can do a poll of one. Won't be very meaningful, but we'll see where it goes. Of who are you banking with? And basically, for U.S. audiences, are you banking with one of our top 4 big banks? Are you a JP Morgan, Chase banker, or Wells Fargo, Citibank, or Bank of America? Do you use one of those? There's a handful of people that always say they still bury their money in the backyard, but then the rest of the folks are using regional banks or credit unions, basically a smaller local bank. And usually the hands in the room, it's about a 50-50 split between the big banks and these regional banks. And if you look at the larger US market, and I'm going to deep dive into the banking here, but I'll bring this back up in a second, is that our top 4 banks in the US, at least as of last year, had about $7 trillion in assets, a lot of money. And they have that because, they dominate in mindshare. Again, you see their branches everywhere. You see their ATMs everywhere. They advertise. They're the names on sports stadiums. Basically, they're the people you see all over the place. However, they only have 40% of the total assets in the US. And again, this is a banking industry that goes back centuries. There's a long tail of regional banks, institutions that house over 60%, $11 trillion in assets. And there's 11,000 different registered banks and credit unions. So it's interesting to see this space that has been around for so long really has this long tail. My family, myself, I bank with a Big Four. My wife has a regional bank. And we actually use that regional bank for most of our insurance needs and that types of things. So the question comes back to, okay, why do you pick one bank versus the other? And people go to the big banks again. They see them everywhere, access to ATMs. They're usually in front of innovations. Again, they have the money to invest in new technologies. If there's ever going to be a virtual reality banking experience, it's probably going to come from one of those Big Four first. And you get pretty uniform services everywhere. But on the flip side, there's reasons why we personally use a different bank for certain needs, and reasons why other people do. They like the intimate personal service. They like having that human factor of someone that they go to that understands it. They like a member of their community that understands their community, the regional differences, what they're trying to do. They have flexibility in pricing. Maybe there's a little bit more transparency in what they do. So it's all those aspects that fuel this $11 trillion of our money going into these regional banks. So taking this back to our cloud space, what we're talking about. To me, I saw a lot of similarities there. You think about Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM Cloud, these big behemoths out there in the market. They have a lot of the market share, but we're still seeing tremendous growth in these VMware cloud providers. And where they're differentiating themselves, where they come in is a lot of those same ways, again, a regional bank does. It's that personal touch. It's a cloud provider that understands a specific vertical or specific industry. They understand and have dedicated resources on the healthcare space, or to pick one, for example. They are positioned to be what we call maybe a sovereign cloud, where Many governments, they want to know that their data is going to stay within their country as opposed to going to a big cloud where metadata may move out of one data center into another across one of these big clouds. The cloud providers can negotiate. They're flexible in pricing. They have transparency in pricing, which is important to a lot of people nowadays. Flexibility, community knowledge, all those things I think go into how we're seeing this cloud provider ecosystem remain strong, continue to grow, and differentiate themselves. And for any of the cloud providers out there that are listening, I think that's what I'll impart to you is it's important for you to look at what are your differences. It's no longer going to be on the IaaS piece again. That's the commodity, just like in the banking industry, being able to transact and store dollars and money in an electronic account. That's table stakes. That's kind of the fundamentals. But what are those services that you build on top of it? And I think that's for the cloud providers, the opportunity there. And whereas we think about the longer term viability and how they differentiate, where I think we'll continue to see this pretty interesting world evolve, marry that with this notion that people are now comfortable using multiple clouds. And again, from my personal view, why I moved over to this team and focus is I see just, this vibrant community, a lot of opportunity to grow and differentiate themselves, and think we'll continue to see that as we move forward.
In your experience, are there certain types of businesses or organizations that tend to prefer cloud providers versus the large public clouds?
Yeah, great question. I would say the sweet spot for a lot of providers is in that the commercial, the medium-sized enterprises. I think that's one obvious one that jumps out because they are companies that their IT teams aren't as large. They won't have a dedicated, and just to pick on one cloud, an AWS person on staff. And so they're looking more for that help in navigating different clouds, and they want someone they could talk to that doesn't just deliver them the service, but bring some of the managed services capabilities on top of it. So I say that size of customer is definitely a sweet spot for cloud providers. And then I think if you move up to look at, okay, why do big enterprises, would they look at cloud providers versus another? I think the pricing opportunity, again, a lot of providers are very competitive in pricing, transparent in pricing. We'll customize things, that's one. The vertical expertise is another. So if you're in a specific industry where you need to meet certain requirements, whether it's compliance reasons for your industry, whether it's certain applications, we see those people go. And then the government's a great example, especially outside of the US and in Europe and a lot of the Asia countries. Definitely a preference for large government agencies to look at a sovereign cloud, someone within their region that knows, only lives in that space, and they have more confidence in, that does stuff custom for that place as opposed to going to this big multinational cloud. So those are some of the big ones that jump out of where we see this preference and why kind of the persona of who will maybe go more to the cloud providers.
Now, one of the things you suggest is that building clouds and building efficient clouds are two completely different things. How so, and what do you think makes a cloud more efficient than another?
Yeah, and that is absolutely important as we think through the growth of public clouds, and again, this notion that IaaS, infrastructure as a service, is becoming a little bit more of a commodity. Delivery management services on top of that is important and a focus for many. However, still a lot of that core revenue, it starts with that foundation of course, of delivering that infrastructure as a service. And so there is a huge focus of providers to do so more efficiently, of building an efficient cloud, not just offering a cloud, but doing so efficiently. And as we actually think about our providers, we segment them into a few buckets. We have our cloud builders. These are people that are fundamentally, classically building clouds. And then we're seeing this emergence of providers that fall into this asset light category. And by asset light, we mean providers are looking to grow their business, offer cloud, offer services built on top of cloud services. So they're not necessarily building their own data center, so it's asset light. They're not buying assets. Instead, they're delivering services on top of a cloud offering like a VMware Cloud and AWS that someone else is managing the IaaS piece for, and these providers are delivering the services on top. And without a doubt, the bulk, I think, is still our cloud providers. And one of the investments and focus points for VMware is how can we help these providers compete in that space to make sure they're competitive when it comes to infrastructure, so that they can then layer on those services and differentiate themselves on top. And from our view, where we're investing, where we're partnering with providers, is investing in a few ways. One is our core platform, VMware Cloud Director, is a key solution we offer to deliver multi-tenancy, to help providers enable extensibility into new services. So not only lets them in one system carve it out across multiple tenants, so really to optimize the use of that systems, but then how do they then start to extend it to backup and other services? That's I think one key area of building that efficient cloud. The other one is definitely on automation. So more and more focus on things like Terraform and building infrastructure as code. In fact, I was chatting with just last week, maybe the week before, our Europe team that's building a lot of our Terraform automation, and they rolled out a new release and got a lot of feedback from customers that are really looking, one of our providers that has a core business where they're building the cloud. So this automation is important to them, but not unlike a lot of our other providers, they also have a business that uses Azure and AWS and some of the other public clouds. And as they think through the process of when to choose which one and automating that process for their own customers, that automation layer is important to them. So that's one area, again, coming back to efficiency, that is key. And then the other piece is just coming to the business operations side of it. It's not the sexy, exciting part of the cloud, but it's important, and it comes down to the pricing, the metering aspects of things, and how do we help providers more efficiently expand out their services with new products without, again, getting locked in and being able to do so at a very kind of a la carte manner. And that's one of the shifts that we've been making on our side as well, is helping them have this core set of products they can use. And then as they're looking to expand to new services, add those on very, very efficiently.
Now, VMware also suggests that there needs to be more of a focus on high-value cloud services and less on the complexities of managing infrastructures and custom tools. What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is on a little bit of this notion of, as IaaS becomes a little bit more of a commodity, the value for providers will be on what do they do on top of that. And one of the big changes that I had to make when I shifted away from an enterprise customer to a provider is enterprise customers, you talk a lot about ROI, return on investments, and their TCO, their total cost of ownership, and these stats. Providers, it really comes down to profitability, to margins, like how much money can they make in selling a service, as that's what fuels their business, fuels their innovation to deliver new things. And what we're seeing is, again, that competition for pure IaaS is shrinking. Historically, rough numbers here, historically providers would often be able to see a 40% margin for their IaaS business, but that's definitely coming under pressure. We're seeing providers start to simply just resell an AWS, but that resale model, you're seeing margins go from, again, maybe that 40% level down to 20 to 25%. Again, because just some of that value is being pulled out of what they're doing. We're seeing that if we see a shift even further down to platform as a service, where you're reselling platform as a service, those margins can get down to, 7%, 10%, because now you're not even managing an OS and you're doing even less. So as you see in that core foundational layer, margins start to shrink. It becomes more and more important for providers to rethink of their business, to relook at, okay, what can they fundamentally do? What are the challenges, the problems for end customers that they can help address? And how do they deliver meaningful services on top of that? And by meaningful services means, how do they deliver services they can get more value out of, more margins, more charge more, because they're delivering some specific value to customers. So seeing this shift, and there's a lot of options out there. Going back to our comment on the differentiation, we're seeing providers go in a lot of different directions now to help differentiate themselves. There's core things like disaster recovery as a service, monitoring as a service, that are just some of the basics, and monitoring across clouds. How do we help customers monitor across all these different environments they're using? How do we start to get into more managed applications? Great partner in APJ for us just announced, and I think it is one of the first for VMware Cloud providers, is doing SAP HANA as a service. So managed SAP HANA environments, and really taking on that burden from clients. So becoming the expert in that application and helping clients navigate either the migration to SAP HANA or the initialization of it. So becoming more application focused. Network and security, so firewalls, load balancers, compliance, encryption service, and then of course containers, developer-ready clouds. See a lot of interest in partners looking to help end customers kind of offer Kubernetes as a service, take that burden off of companies, so they don't have to worry about those details and all the ins and outs of getting Kubernetes running, but really focus on the development and simply point to these clouds. So I think that's just an example of some of these higher value cloud services that we're seeing spin up more and more, and also ties back a little bit into how providers are starting to differentiate themselves in these different areas.
Now, you're in charge of product marketing. I'm curious, you've been doing this for a while. Do you have any advice for any product marketers that are kind of listening as to what they could be doing now, maybe differently, maybe things you've found to be very successful in your line of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one is, as I talk to my team and engage with them, is the one thing that's clear, and I've rattled off a little bit here, is there's a lot going on. It's a complex world. So I think one of the things that we're focusing on, and one of the things that I'd advise is simplifying down that message. I think we are at a point where we're getting back to this world of all these different choices, all of these different cloud options, these different ways applications are made, different ways things are stored. How do we simplify that message down? So how do we make it clear what we can do, and make it clear what you can't do? One, it helps your customers figure out what you're doing. For those of you working with your own sales team, it helps them quickly identify where there's opportunity, or where they're just spinning their wheels, and when they need to move on. So I think today's world, it comes down to simplifying. And then maybe the other one that's just been interesting lately is just the different ways that we can reach our end customers, and playing around with those avenues, with clearly the classic avenues through web and things, the social media channels, the Slack environments, a lot of the multimedia environments, of starting to find out understanding who your customers are. In our case, it's providers, and what's the best route to reach them, and really focusing on that route, because that communication path of making sure they understand what you're doing is important as well.
And one of the last questions we ask all of our guests on this show is, where do you see technology going within the next year?
Yeah, and from a personal side, I'm really interested to see what are the trends and innovations that come out of, again, this new world we live in, and the fact that so many people are at home finding new ways to work. What's going to come out of that? So to me, I'm really interested there. But I think coming back to this topic, I mean, maybe two trends that I'm thinking about, and this is where, as I look at our providers, what they're asking about, and over the next year, I think will become more important, is one, I talked about this a little bit, is automation. I see automation becoming more and more important. Going back to your question about efficiency, going back to this question about multi-cloud environments, providers need to be able to do so efficiently, and continue to stay competitive, and find ways to make it easier for themselves to roll out, again, new services. So I think that automation trend, the use of Terraform, infrastructure as a code, some of these other technologies will continue to expand, and we'll see that be more of a focus point for providers. And then maybe the second one is this idea of I think we'll see technology come to help us avoid this path of going back into this world of having siloed applications and infrastructure that all need to be managed separately, that need to be monitored separately, maintained, different skill sets. How do we start to bring these multi-cloud environments together? Again, I don't want to. People talk about single pane of glass all the time. It's a little bit of a utopian idea, a little at times. But that notion of is there a way? And I think we'll see technologies come out that help us get our arms around all these different endpoints, help simplify that end user experience, and help providers start to be able to deploy applications across whatever endpoint makes the most sense, but still maintain some level of visibility across them, some way to monitor and understand what's going on.
Michael, you provided a lot of knowledge with us today, and definitely a lot of passion. If people want to learn more about what we talked about today, or they want to connect with you to ask questions, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, I'd say first off, maybe the one spot to go is from our side. We have a website. Go to cloudsolutions.vmware.com. That's cloudsolutions.vmware.com. That's our course site that has all of our resources, assets, and then it'll link out to our cloud provider blog, our YouTube channel, and social media sites for you to find. On Twitter, you can follow us and reach us at Cloud Happens. This is probably the best way. So that would be the one spot to start, and you can spend your night navigating from there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for being here with us today and sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely. Pleasure to join, and thanks so much for having me.
If you like this episode or have a question, join the discussion on Twitter at Ingram TechSoul with the hashtag B2B Tech Talk. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro.
You've been listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, hosted by Carrie Roberts. This episode was sponsored by Ingram Micro's Imagine Next. B2B Tech Talk is a joint production with Sweetfish Media and Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro production handled by Laura Burton and Christine Fan. To not miss an episode, subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform.